Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really going to get a handle on what it means to be an assistant finance manager. So maybe you're thinking about stepping into this role, or perhaps you're looking to hire one for your team. Either way, you are definitely in the right place. We've got a great piece to kick things off. 6 assistant finance manager interview questions from Kaplan.
Yeah, and looking at interview questions like these is, well, it's pretty insightful. It really cuts to the chase.
Yeah.
It shows you not just the technical stuff, but also the core abilities and the day-to-day reality of the job.
Yeah.
Gives you a much clearer picture than like just a standard job description.
Absolutely. So our mission today for this deep dive is basically to unpack these questions and pull out those essential skills, the key responsibilities that really define what makes a successful assistant finance manager. Think of it as your fast track to understanding what's really involved. Okay, let's jump right in. A foundational area, financial planning and analysis. The Kaplan article brings up 2 key questions here. First, experience with budgeting and forecasting, and second, experience with financial analysis and reporting.
Okay, so budgeting and forecasting. What's interesting here is that it's way more than just crunching numbers. That first question, it really digs into whether someone can, learn from the past and think about the future. It's about building detailed budgets, sure, using historical data, but maybe even more crucial is developing those projections, forecasting future financial performance. And you've got to consider both the short-term and the long-term strategic picture.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's not just a set it and forget it kind of thing, is it? Kaplan mentions analyzing variances. And this is where it gets interesting, I think, because it shows the role isn't just about making the initial plans, it's about really digging into why the actual results might be different from the plan. And then, crucially, coming up with recommendations, actual things to do to improve. That's where the real analytical muscle comes in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of insights are companies usually looking for there?
That's a great question. It's not just finding what the variance is, but the why. A strong assistant finance manager, they'll dig for root causes, say sales are lower than forecast. Is it just a seasonal thing? Is a competitor doing something new? Or is it maybe something internal, like a marketing campaign that didn't quite hit the mark?
Okay.
And then the recommendations, they need to be specific, practical, not just saying sell more, but maybe suggesting, I don't know, a targeted campaign or looking into new sales channels. It's about going from diagnosis to actual concrete solutions.
Right, moving beyond just identifying the problem. That level of thinking, that analysis, it naturally leads us to the 4th question. They mentioned financial analysis and reporting. It says proficiency with financial software is key, which, well, feels like a given nowadays, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty much table stakes now.
So what elevates someone here? What makes them stand out?
Well, you're right. Everyone needs the software skills. The real value add is being able to take all that raw data and turn it into reports that are actually insightful, reports people can understand. You absolutely need to be able to create and interpret the core financial statements, balance sheet, income statement, that kind of thing. But it's more than just generating numbers. It's about understanding the story those numbers are telling, about the company's health, its performance.
And that story isn't just for the finance folks, is it? Kaplan specifically mentions being comfortable explaining this stuff, interpreting it for non-financial stakeholders. That seems like a really critical bridge-building part of the role.
Oh, absolutely. Huge. You might be presenting results to the marketing team, talking about ROI on campaigns, or maybe to operations discussing cost savings. It's not enough to be a wizard with spreadsheets.
Yeah.
You have to be a clear communicator. You need to translate that potentially complex finance jargon into language that makes sense, language that's actionable for colleagues in different departments, people who aren't finance experts.
Right.
And that ability, connecting and communicating financial insights, that actually brings us neatly to the next theme from the questions: interpersonal and leadership skills. Specifically, question 2, handling difficult stakeholders or team members.
Ah, yes. This one feels, well, pretty universal in any job where you work with others. Finance often has to deliver news or enforce rules that aren't exactly popular. Kaplan's take emphasizes effective communication, understanding where the other person's coming from, addressing their concerns professionally. It mentions active listening, trying to find solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah.
What are some common tough spots an assistant finance manager might run into here? Well, you can imagine situations, right? Like a department goes over budget and needs to explain why.
Right.
Or maybe there's a disagreement about how to account for a certain expense. In those moments, the assistant finance manager needs to listen, really listen with empathy to the stakeholders' view, understand their pressures, their priorities, even if they ultimately don't agree with them.
Okay.
It's about validating their concerns while still holding the line on financial policy and accuracy. Finding that middle ground where the company's financial integrity is protected and the stakeholder feels heard, feels respected. That's the key. It takes a lot of diplomacy and good problem-solving skills.
So it's less about just laying down the law, the financial rules,
Hmm.
and more about navigating those tricky conversations with empathy, building trust, even when the decisions are tough.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, staying sharp, staying relevant in finance is crucial. Question 3 hits on professional development and industry awareness. How does someone in this role typically stay current? What do they need to know? This points to the proactive side of the job, definitely. Kaplan highlights a few key ways. Reading industry publications regularly that
Mhm.
keeps you up on trends, new regulations, attending conferences, seminars. Those offer deeper learning and chances to connect with peers. And, something that's often underrated, the value of networking and mentorship. Getting those perspectives from people with more experience is invaluable.
Networking and mentorship, yeah, that's like tapping into a real-world knowledge bank, isn't it? Goes beyond the textbooks. You get those practical tips, those insights that can really make a difference.
Hmm.
So it's not just knowing the current rules, but also getting a feel for where things might be heading.
Exactly right. The financial world, it's always changing. New regulations pop up, technology reshapes how we do things, best practices evolve. So committing to continuous professional development, it's not just nice to have. It's really essential for an assistant finance manager to stay effective and keep adding value.
Gotcha. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Let's look at the more operational side with question 5. Prioritizing and managing workload effectively.
Right.
This is where you really see how organized you need to be. An assistant finance manager is likely juggling, well, a whole bunch of different things with different deadlines. Kaplan's suggestion highlights identifying the most urgent, the time-sensitive tasks first, and then making a detailed plan, a schedule to manage it all.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is how dynamic it is. It's not just about making a plan and then sticking to it no matter what.
Yeah.
The response specifically mentions continuously reviewing and adjusting the plan.
Oh, okay.
That highlights the need for flexibility, for adaptability.
Hmm.
Unexpected stuff always comes up, right? Priorities shift based on business needs. Being able to reassess, to reprioritize effectively, that's crucial for staying on track and making sure important things don't fall through the cracks.
Absolutely. That ability to pivot when needed, while still keeping a clear view of everything that needs doing, seems essential to avoid just getting completely swamped. Okay, finally, let's dive into a really critical area. Maybe not always glamorous, but absolutely vital. Regulatory knowledge and compliance. That's covered in question 6.
Yes, and this is where precision, attention to detail are just non-negotiable. Kaplan's answer specifically mentions experience ensuring compliance with financial regulations. It names Sarbanes-Oxley, often called SOX, which is big on internal controls and accurate reporting, and JAP, generally accepted accounting principles, which is the standard accounting framework. It also highlights implementing internal controls as a key responsibility for staying compliant.
And keeping up with these regulations, it's not a one-time task, is it? The Kaplan piece mentions attending seminars, meetings, even consulting with legal and compliance experts. Sounds like constant learning is required just to keep the company on the right side of the law.
Precisely. Financial regulations are complex, they're always evolving, and assistant finance manager has to be proactive, staying informed about changes, making sure the company's practices line up. That vigilance is just crucial for protecting the organization from potential legal trouble, financial risks.
Wow. So when we put it all together, this deep dive into these interview questions, it really paints a pretty comprehensive picture for us, doesn't it?
It does.
The assistant finance manager role, it demands this fascinating mix of skills. You need that strong technical finance foundation, budgeting, forecasting, analysis, reporting. We covered that. But as we've seen, that's really only part of the story, only part of what makes someone truly successful.
Exactly. You also absolutely need those critical interpersonal skills, communicating effectively, building solid working relationships even when it's tough. Then there's that proactive commitment to always be learning, developing professionally, which is essential,
Mhm.
and of course, top-notch organizational and time management skills to handle the daily whirlwind.
Right.
And underpinning everything is that solid grasp of and commitment to financial regulations and compliance.
So thinking about all these core competencies we've discussed, the tech skills, the people skills, the learning mindset, the organization, Here's a final thought for everyone listening. In today's, constantly shifting financial world, what single skill do you think really separates a good assistant finance manager from a truly exceptional one? Is it maybe their deep analytical power, their knack for explaining complex stuff simply, their ability to adapt quickly to new rules, new tech, or maybe it's their proactive approach to managing risk?
Hmm.
Something to really chew on. We encourage you to think about that and maybe even explore some of the specific areas we touched on today in more detail as you continue your own journey. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.